Good morning. My name is John Pacini, and I am an entrepreneur, I focused most of my career in the financial services and the technology space, starting in financial services. I sold my first company in 2000, and I have now been, the last 6 years, heavily involved in the parenting space. We co-founded the Mom 2.0 Summit and the Dad 2.0 Summit, as well as some other online parenting ventures. And so happy to be here, and I think this is a great panel. The folks that we have up here today, Philadelphia is a great venue to talk about entrepreneurship, right? Because it's the birthplace of the United States. The founding fathers and mothers of the United States were the ultimate entrepreneurs, okay? They decided they wanted to create a new path, a new way, a new paradigm, and they built it and they made it happen from scratch. And everybody told them that this was not a good idea. The boss, the king, decided didn't agree with this was a good idea, and so they went out and they defied the odds and they changed the world. And so I think this is a great setting for that, and I think that a unique conference like this with the kids and the parents together is a great opportunity to have those discussions, because entrepreneurship at any age isn't going to happen without the support of your friends and family, and particularly at a young age. So I think that, and we'll talk some more about that with our panel today. Just to run down the panel real fast, and we'll go through it. Nick Normile is a blogger and food enthusiast and entrepreneur. Started Foodie at 15, and now is a student at the Wharton Business School here in Pennsylvania. Dan.
Try it.
Brusilovsky.
There you go.
Dan Brusilovsky has been involved in tech since he was 10 years old, and has been involved in some of the, I think, more impressive ventures in Silicon Valley, and is a pretty remarkable guy. And then Tori Molnar is one of the most remarkable young ladies I've met in a long time, and has a great story. She's the founder of Utor, which is a direct sales company working with teenage girls. So, the name of the panel is The Next Steve Jobs, and depending on what you think of Steve Jobs, or if you've read his biography, that may or may not be what you want to aspire to. But Steve Jobs did change the world, and in a variety of ways. And so I think that everybody here has their own story and how they're going to at least attempt, as we all do as entrepreneurs, to try and change our corner of the world. So I wanted to start actually with Tori, and just have you kind of tell us about Utor and the concept and how you got there, and introduce it to us.
So
turn off these lights that are flickering. Can we just lose?
Yeah.
It's distracting, and I want to hear everything you're going to say.
Let's see. Okay, guys, don't. Wait a minute.
There you go.
There we go. All right.
Thank you.
First try.
John to the rescue.
AV, another skill.
So Utor is a direct sales company for young women, where they can come to not only sell products and earn money, but also develop business skills. So what we've really created is this community and this network for young women to come and meet other young or like-minded people, and just a way for them to kind of develop themselves, not only as entrepreneurs, but as young women and future leaders of the business world, our country, different things like that. We really promote trying to build confidence and some of those major things. But instead of private labeling our own products, we actually work with small businesses all over the country to give their products brand exposure and education through our army of Utor girls. So we've really taken the direct sales industry and kind of reinvented the model in a lot of ways. I started the company my freshman year of high school. I was looking for a business to start while all my friends were looking for jobs. I decided that I was going to start this online boutique where I was going to sell fashion rings. And in the process of starting this boutique, I was communicating with a lot of manufacturers in both the US and in China. And as these samples from manufacturers started coming in, my friends would come over, see the product, and they started getting curious of how they could start something similar, how they could sell jewelry, or maybe implement these different ideas that they had for businesses. So I started mentoring my friends and helping them launch businesses in the process of still trying to be a freshman in high school. And I was trying to launch my own company, which was the online boutique. And at the same time, I was reading Mary Kay Ash's biography. And the things that Mary Kay Ash talked about in her biography were, you know, the morals and principle behind why she started Mary Kay and how she wanted to empower women and how she wanted to educate people about healthy skin and having, you know, that healthy skin regimen and all these different things that I found really interesting. So the workload of trying to mentor my friends and spending all this time on that and trying to launch my own company and, you know, still be a freshman in high school and try to take on that workload became a little overwhelming. My grades started dropping, I was failing high school, and they were threatening to kick me out. At the same time, I was trying to like mentor all my friends. I was like, well, I can't let them down. So I knew that I realized that I needed to find a way to give them all the same information I was already giving them, but in a way that was less time consuming for me. And that's when Mary Kay Ash really inspired me to turn my online boutique into a direct sales company where I could recruit my friends to sell the products for me, both through parties and online and different things like that. And a lot of what John and I had talked about even before this panel was, you know, ignorance is bliss. And if I'd known what I know now about the direct sales industry, I wouldn't have been able to create this company because there are so many principles and rules and, you know, golden rules, I guess you could call them, that the direct sales industry really abides by that I didn't know about. Therefore, I really took the model and changed it. But if I would have known that, I would have been too scared to do so. So that's kind of really how I started Utoria.
That's great. So Dan, you got started in tech at 10 years old, and you're the only person, at least as far as I know, on this panel that has actually met the real Steve Jobs.
I have, yes.
And as part of your journey. And so tell us a little bit about kind of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I live in Silicon Valley, so kind of the heart of all things tech, which is really, really awesome. And that's why I got exposed to tech at such a young age. Both my parents work at tech companies, so growing up I was already surrounded by tech. I was already surrounded by entrepreneurs. I was seeing all these companies basically in my backyard. On the weekends, my dad and I used to take apart computers and put them back together as like fun weekend projects. And what used to take the entire weekend turned into taking just one day, which turned into taking just a few hours, which turned into, you know, just taking an hour, which turned into taking 30 minutes, and so on. And after that, I kind of fell in love with technology. I'm one of those kind of people who see something and is very curious on how it works, the kind of the inner workings. And so being able to take apart a computer and seeing what each part did and how important it was to another part was really, really fun. And then I kind of found the internet, and in a way the rest is history. I was going, I met a bunch of bloggers and podcasters in Silicon Valley and got inspired to try to do that myself. And started hanging out with a guy, his name is Robert Scoble. He was Microsoft's first blogger back in the early 2000s. And now he's a pretty well-influential person in Silicon Valley. He interviews thousands of entrepreneurs and geeks all over the world. And that's kind of how I got into tech. When I was 14, I was going to events in Silicon Valley and going to conferences, and I was always the youngest guy in the room. And I thought to myself, like, I can't be the only kind of young person who's into tech in Silicon Valley. I mean, after all, it is Silicon Valley, kind of the birthplace of all things tech and entrepreneurship. And so I started a company called Teens and Tech Labs to essentially connect young entrepreneurs, and we started that in 2008. In 2009, we did our very first Teens in Tech conference, and 75 people showed up. We did absolutely no marketing. We literally just put up a registration page and said, look, if you're interested in the same things that I am and that a few of my other friends are, then we should talk. And 75 people came in 2009, 150 came in 2010, and last year 255 people came. At the same time, we realized that a lot of our attendees had ideas for startups and had ideas for mobile apps and things like that. And so we thought, you know, look, you can't get too much done in one day. What if we did a summer program where we took a small amount of teen entrepreneurs and helped them start a company over the course of the summer? And so now we run an incubator that we ran for the first time last year, and it's running right now as we speak back in Mountain View, California, which is about 40 minutes south of San Francisco. And that's kind of Teens in Tech. A few weeks ago, actually, I joined Highland Capital Partners, which is a 25-year-old, $3.5 billion venture capital firm in Boston. And so now I'm an associate on the internet and digital media team, actually investing in entrepreneurs all over the world, which is really exciting because, you know, seeing young entrepreneurs go from, you know, the process of having an idea to actually building it, and seeing kind of that entire process and seeing their reaction and seeing when people love what they're doing is really awesome. And so now being able to do that on a larger scale is pretty exciting.
That's great. Nick, so you started Foodie at 15 at 12, right? That was sort of a kind of cutting edge for somebody at a young age to be as knowledgeable as you were about food and be able to communicate that in a blog, and you built a pretty wide audience and have built from there. So tell us about that.
One thing John forgot to mention, I also started Facebook.
He left his hoodie at home.
Exactly. No, so basically I really wanted to be a chef when I was younger. So when I was 13, I started working in a restaurant called La Croix. It's in the Rittenhouse Hotel in Rittenhouse Square. And then, you know, I went there every weekend. You know, I was learning from the chefs. I you know, read all the cookbooks, whatever. Worked at a few other restaurants in the city, Osteria, Amada, Fork, which is just a few blocks away. And so I started having these really interesting food experiences that I thought other people would appreciate. So I started my blog when I was 15, and it actually, you know, surprisingly, it became pretty popular. I think partially because there weren't too many other people, young people who were writing about their experiences. So yeah, you know, I was pretty successful with that. And then 2 summers ago, I thought, you know, I'll take my passion and I will, you know, try to make money off of it. So I started doing private dinners for my mom's friends, and then for some of the readers of my blog, and then, you know, I would hand out the business cards after each dinner. So I started getting more and more people, and you know, that was my summer job. You know, not working at an ice cream shop exactly. But so yeah, so you know, largely because of my food stuff, I was able to get into Penn and get into Wharton, and now I'm not quite at this guy's level, but I'm working at a venture capital firm now. So investing in tech entrepreneurs and that kind of thing.
So, to something you just said, Nick, you talked about doing the you know, dinners for your friends and family, and then growing it from there. That's something that I think as anybody starts a business, whether they're younger or older, that you have to be able to grow from that friends and family stage, but do it in a smart way and not just say, hey, can you please help me? So you're able to provide value, demonstrate value in what you're doing, and then, you know, rely on that word of mouth and that sort of hands-on marketing that you're doing with that. So talk a little bit about that and how you concepted that was something you were going to spend months of time on, working on, obviously money, effort, and how that worked out.
Right. So I had worked at a bunch of nice restaurants in the city, and I thought, unlike a lot of chefs out there, I had, you know, some decent people skills. You know, we had a good conversation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
still are.
Yeah. So you know, I was comfortable going up to, I mean, asking if my parents' friends would you know, would value a dinner cooked by me for their, I don't know, a few of their friends, whatever. And so, you know, I didn't want the pity, you know, dinner order, I don't know, whatever. I didn't want them to do it because they were, you know, pitying me, just because they thought, because they wanted to help out my parents. You know, I made sure that I was actually providing legitimate value, and I could, because I worked at a bunch of nice restaurants, and you know, food was my thing. So
Dan, one of the things that is kind of, when you look at entrepreneurship, and to some degree it's the elephant in the room, so to speak, is getting your education, getting an education. Everybody talks about college is very important. I'm a big believer in college. I'm a product a college education, graduate school. And so it's something that's very important to me, but when you look at the entrepreneurship world and you look at the titans of entrepreneurship, the Bill Gateses and the Mark Zuckerbergs, they're all college dropouts, okay? So as somebody who chose that path and dropped out of college to do what you're doing and you've seen success, talk about what you're seeing out there and kind of your perspective on that.
Right, so I mean, going to school and the whole kind of school discussion is a very interesting one all around the world, but especially in Silicon Valley. So I'm 19 now. I have an older sister who's 28 who went to UCSD, graduated top of her class, and now she's a scientist doing, basically finding a cure for Hep A, B, and C. And then here comes Daniel, the entrepreneur in the family, who doesn't want to go to school and kind of wants to be the rebel in the family. So you can kind of tell how the parents reacted. But it's very interesting being in Silicon Valley right now with the whole school situation. Peter Thiel, the original angel investor in Facebook, also one of the co-founders of PayPal, set up a organization called 20 Under 20. Have any of you guys heard of it? So it's a little controversial. Basically, Peter Thiel gives 20 young adults $100,000 over the course of 2 years to basically stop going to school. And there are no rules except for you can't use any of that money to pay for anything related to school. And it's very interesting, especially now in Silicon Valley where, and I think it is still very important to get a college degree. And I think it's even more important to at least go. I went for 1.5 years, and I, after that point, figured out that it wasn't something that I was enjoying, that I found useful, wasn't really worth my time anymore, but I at least went. And I think a lot of younger people in Silicon Valley are looking at it as, oh, I don't even have to go. It's just one of those things that this guy, one of my good friends, his name is Sahil Lavinia, he's 20 years old, dropped out of USC to join the founding team of Pinterest, left Pinterest to start his own company, and now has raised $8 million from one of the most historic VC firms, Kleiner Perkins. But he's not the norm. He's not the normal kind of teenage entrepreneur. I mean, number one, he went to a good school. He went to USC. Number two, he had an opportunity to join now what is one of the largest startups in the world, Pinterest. And that at the time was a stupid opportunity to pass up. And I think, especially in Silicon Valley, a lot of entrepreneurs are very naive. They look at everyone else around them and see how successful they are, and they drive fancy cars and things like that, and they aspire to be that. And every path is extremely different. I mean, for me, I always knew that learning for me was hands-on. It wasn't something I was ever going to do in a classroom. So learning how to start a company or how to do certain things, I wasn't going to learn sitting in a classroom with other people. I was just going to go and do it, and I was going to learn from that. And so I think the school debate is very interesting, and I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley are starting to look at school as unnecessary. And it'll be interesting to get your thoughts with Wharton and Penn, which is one of the best business schools in the country, which really focuses on entrepreneurship and teaching entrepreneurship and business and things like that. But I just think it's, a lot of people take education for granted because we have elementary school and middle school and high school, and then when we get to college, it's kind of this voluntary thing, but it's almost like it's involuntary because there's kind of this expectation that everyone is going to go. And the fact that there aren't people that are going, I think it's kind of changing the status quo in a bit in Silicon Valley, and I think in other places like New York, a lot of my friends are dropping out of NYU and they're raising money. One of my friends just raised $1 million from Richard Branson, dropped out of NYU, packed up all her things and moved to LA. I mean, it's becoming more of a common thing. But I still think if you have the opportunity to go to college, go for a year. I mean, experience it instead of just saying no to it completely.
Right, and I think there's a lot of people that would take $100,000 to drop out of school. I mean,
right.
But that doesn't make necessarily the right idea for everybody.
And that's why it's so controversial.
Right, right. So looking at that and having to kind of, I mean, you want to respond to that, Nick? I mean, you've doubled down on on your education at Wharton. Obviously, that's a great school. It's a world-class school. How do you feel about that? How does that relate to your goals as an entrepreneur?
Right. So basically, I think kind of going along what he said, Daniel said.
You got it right.
Got it. People look at the outliers, the Steve Jobs, the Bill Gates, thank you, Zuckerberg, and see that they dropped out of school. Those are the outliers. That isn't the majority. The majority of successful people who started, whatever, billion-dollar businesses went to college. I don't have facts on that, but people. The reason those stories stand out is because those are what gets the attention.
They're an
you know what I mean? Exactly. Those stories make headlines. That doesn't mean those are in any way the majority. So I like what you said. At least go for 1 year, go to college. At least try it out. For one, I'm really happy. I'm going to school now because I've made a lot of great connections through school. I've met a lot of people who, down the line, I'm sure will help me out. A lot of professors who, can advise me on if I decide to start my own company, any logistics, whatever. As of now, I think it's worth going, worth trying out for sure.
Well, and that goes back to the question of can you teach entrepreneurship, right? I mean, it's a great, the headline of Harvard MBA makes a lot of money and runs business that's not newsworthy, right? And people expect that person at that point is going to be able to do that. But that doesn't necessarily imbue them with the ability to do that as an entrepreneur. So, Tori, I want to shift gears for a second and talk about what drives entrepreneurship and the backstory of the things that really, I think, light that fire under the entrepreneur. And so one of the things you talked about was wanting to have that story and wanting to be able to see it in other things that drive passion in you. So you talked about a candle company that inspired you so much, and maybe you can talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so one of the things that we do at Utoria is, I told you guys a little bit about how we partner with small businesses instead of private labeling our own products. And part of the reason we do that is because we found that the Utoria girls can be more passionate about the product when they can see the people and the stories and kind of the meaning behind what that product is. So when John and I talked earlier, we talked about this candle company that was in our product line, I think 2 campaigns ago. It was a company called Bridgewater Candles, and for every candle sold, they fed an orphan in Haiti for 1 day. Now there was a special candle that we sold that had a handprint on the side of it, and it was a really inspirational story. But this candle in particular fed orphans in Haiti for 1 week. So the story behind the candle was that there was this orphan, and his mother, after she gave birth to him, she realized that she wasn't going to live for much longer. So she dropped him off at the steps of the orphanage in a basket. And she never wanted her son to forget how she smelled, so she left him with a bottle of her perfume. So the candle was actually the scent of this perfume. And here the story was that the owners of Bridgewater Candle had ended up adopting this orphan from Haiti, and they wanted to tell his story through this candle. So the handprint on the side of it was their son's. And it was a very inspirational story, and I actually found them at America's Mart, which is like this huge show that goes on in Atlanta, where tons of manufacturers go to kind of find their distributing channels. And I had met them there, and I had taken back some samples to show my Utoria girls, and they were just really motivated by the story, and they were really excited to tell the story to their customers and their friends and their family, and they were really motivated by that, and it ended up being one of our top-selling items just because the girls were so passionate about that, and they knew that they were making a change in the world somewhere by selling these candles, because they were feeding an orphan for a week every time they sold one. So we really realized that that model was really working for us, and also that it motivated the girls and made them more passionate about what they were doing. So it was a really cool angle to take on the business.
And you talk about backstory. You have your own story. I think that's very inspiring. And it's starting any business isn't without challenges, right? Every business has challenges in the business sense that you're dealing with every day, and you have to figure those out. And money issues and people issues and everything else. But personally, you've been able to overcome a lot of, if you can talk a little bit about, you've had some health challenges and some personal things in your journey that have kind of made it even more remarkable.
Okay, so when I was 18 months old, my father passed away, and my mom was 22 at the time, so it was just her and I, and we lived alone for about 4 years, and then she met my stepdad and got remarried and had my little brother Logan. But 6 months after my father died, I was diagnosed with hemiplegic cerebral palsy, which means that I'm infected in my left side. At the time, I couldn't use my left arm. It was kind of curled up into my chest, and I really couldn't straighten it out. My left foot was turned in. I really couldn't walk very well, and the doctors told my mom that I would never walk, that I would always be dependent on her, and they tried to give me all these labels and kind of programs and government funding and all those things. So I've had to deal with those things, and my dad had a pretty remarkable story too. He was the first ever indoor arena cross national champion, so he raced dirt bikes. And from the time that he found out that my mom was pregnant, he was like, I don't care if it's a boy or a girl, she's going to be a dirt bike champion, like she's getting out there in the motocross ring. So he was very adamant about that, and so he wasn't really disappointed per se, but my mom was like, it's a girl, and he's like, okay, well, we got to figure out how to get her into motocross. So from the day I was born, he was like getting me out on track and just taking me out, kind of exposing me to that. The whole family was kind of into motocross, so it was something that I was always around. And when I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, soon after he died, mom realized that that would never be possible for me, that it was too much of a risk for me to get hurt and get those serious injuries on a dirt bike. So we kind of left those dreams behind. But the thing that we found, that when I started taking an interest in entrepreneurship, I had grown up around it. My mom had owned a accounting firm for 12 years. My stepdad owns a construction company. My grandma, my aunts, my uncles, they all own companies. So one of the things that we realized that when I first started starting companies around 4 or 5 was that I was still my dad's champion. It was just in a different kind of arena. So I've had to overcome those things, and like I said before, I was diagnosed with cerebral palsy, but you would never be able to tell that I have it now. And they say that there's no cure for cerebral palsy, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm cured.
So just another, while we're kind of tying those two things, or tying that to the education side, so you told me a story that I thought was great, how you were in high school and you were trying to not only go through your physical therapy for your cerebral palsy, but also you were trying to run this business, and the principal looked at you and said, what?
He said, well, at the time I was undergoing this treatment where I had to get Botox injections in my leg, and I had serial casting, and I had to go into Pittsburgh, which I live about 40 minutes south of Pittsburgh. And I had to go into Pittsburgh twice a week, one day for physical therapy, which took about all day, and then another day where I had to go get my cast changed. So I was missing 2 days a week of school. Plus I was starting to travel for Utor, and Tori Johnson, who's a small business champion and Good Morning America contributor, had invited me to her conference, and she wanted me to just come there and experience, and it was in Orlando, Florida. So we were getting ready to take this family vacation for 10 days, Disney World, SeaWorld, all these fun things, and then I was going to go to this business conference. So my mom had sat down with my principal in his office, and she told him that I was going to start traveling for my company, and if there was any way I could get credit, or what kind of paper she would have to fill out to make sure that it wasn't an attendance issue, because I was going to be missing a lot of school in the upcoming weeks, especially with my treatment going on in the midst of it. And he said, well, starting a business isn't really an academic type thing, so she won't be able to get any credit for it, and we're going to have some truancy issues, so she can't travel. So mom's like, okay, well, that's all right. I'm just going to take her out of your school and put her in cyber school so that she can travel. So, so I ended up going to cyber school, and I've been traveling all over the country ever since. And I have never once thought about going back to public school, because it was just really boring, and I like traveling a lot more.
Very cool. We tend to talk about the outliers, talk about things. We talk about the success stories, and we talk about the wins. We don't talk about the failures. We don't talk about the research and the try and stumble and try again and do that. And so, you know, I think that I'd love to hear some individual stories, even if it's a small thing, about how you had to stumble through something to figure it out. And maybe, Nick, you can start with this and talk about something that maybe didn't work the way you wanted it to, that you had big plans for.
Can I pass and think about it?
Sure.
So, let's see, when I was first starting out, you know, the irony of Silicon Valley and being young is that it's still not very expected. At least when I was starting out a few years ago, people were not expecting to see, you know, a 15-year-old showing up at industry events next to VCs and things like that. And so when I first started Teens in Tech, you know, the traditional route of starting a company is you have an idea, you go to Sand Hill Road, which is a very historic street in Silicon Valley where all the venture capitalists are. You go to meet all of them and you raise a lot of money, and then you go start your company. And so I thought I would do that. And so I would go to all these industry events and meet VCs, and got meetings with a lot of them. I guess because in pity, because they thought I was this really young kid who's, you know, has these big dreams. And so I would go meet with these guys and kind of pitch my heart out and tell them the idea for Teens in Tech is, you know, I want to be able to bring together young entrepreneurs all over the world and, you know, evolve and help empower them to start companies and really do big things. Because imagine if Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook when he was in high school. You know, there's all these entrepreneurs who start out of college, and so that's a longer story. But I would go to these meetings, and none of the VCs would take me seriously. They thought, oh, there's this 15-year-old guy in here. How cute! You know, he's trying to get money from me. Like, that's never going to happen. And so for the longest time, that was my, you know, after school, my parents would drop me off at the train station, and I would go and meet with all these guys, and every single time it was, you know, no, 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 and kind of enough was enough, and I said, well, you know, screw these guys, I'm not going to work with them, because I want to work with people who believe in what I'm doing and believe in the mission and the vision. And to that date, you know, even today, we've never raised money, we have no outside capital, we're completely self-funded. And it was because, you know, the people who we really felt believed in what we're doing was our own team, our own employees, or else they wouldn't, you know, our CTO's been with us for 2 years. You know, he wouldn't spend his time being with us if he didn't believe in what we were doing. And so I think, you know, one of the big challenges is being young in Silicon Valley is trying to prove yourself, trying to prove that your age.
Being old in Silicon Valley.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
I mean, age is just a number.
Yeah.
It isn't something that qualifies your skills. You know, they may be a little undeveloped, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue learning. And so I think a lot of people are easily turned off by the answer no. And so one of the things that my parents always told me is that, you know, and this is kind of translated into Teens in Tech, if there's someone who gives you a no, there's always a workaround. And with Teens in Tech, I mean, one of the big things that we're doing right now is, you know, it is education in terms of, you know, teaching people entrepreneurship and things like that. We're essentially fighting the education system. Instead of fighting it head on, fighting the government, we're finding all the loopholes and we're just going around it. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, the good entrepreneurs are the ones who think on their feet. And you know, one of my old teachers, he always had this saying: "Problem, solve problem." If you see a problem, you solve the problem. You don't complain that there's a problem and you just stop doing everything that you're doing. You look at a problem and you say, okay, there's this loophole that I know that we can do, and that's what we're going to do. So that's you know, with Teens in Tech, you know, we wanted to raise funding, we wanted to do all these things, and then we saw that at schools there were a lot of entrepreneurs. There were no clubs, there was nothing. So let's find a place outside of school, because most kids hate being in school. Let's find something outside of school that they can, you know, come and meet, and that was the conference. Right. And so I think, you know, that saying, I mean, that was my middle school teacher who told me that. And that's kind of stuck with me since, is if you have a problem, you solve the problem. You don't stop doing what you're doing and start crying and saying, "Oh, my life sucks."
So maybe you can teach entrepreneurship then, right? If that's,
you can.
That's at the heart of it. Is
But you can't teach. You can't teach failure. Failure is something you have to experience on your own, and you have to go through it because you're going to learn from it on your own.
Right.
I can't look at Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook's mistakes, and say I'm not going to make those same exact mistakes because who knows if they're even true. You have to kind of go through it on your own and figure it out on your own because that's really what you learn from.
Right. And don't be afraid of falling down.
Right. And look, I had other businesses that completely failed. Teens in Tech just happens to be the more successful one.
Right.
It's funny it's like for every successful business, there's like 9 failures. And even, coming up with ideas. I'm sure a lot of you guys have ideas for companies or, iPhone apps or things like that. It's the same thing. For that one big idea that you guys have, you may have 20 other just stupid ideas. But it takes those stupid ideas to get to that one great idea. And so a lot of people get easily discouraged by those 20 stupid ideas, and then they finally hit the gold mine and they get that one big idea. And so it's very much about persistence and kind of perseverance.
Who in here has an idea for a business they'd like to start? Just raise your hand if you have an idea for a business. Right.
2 hands.
Yep. We have another hand back there. Yep. So most people have not just one idea, but a lot of people have a lot of ideas, right? And they think it's just which one do I spend my time on? That becomes really the issue. Is just how do I have school, I have work, I have whatever. I have my family time, and what do I take my precious time that I can dedicate on a business, and what can I, which business do I focus, or which idea do I focus on that on? Now, Nick, you started an interesting business a few years ago called CompareFoodPics.com, which was like a hot or not for food pictures, right?
Right.
And for a foodie, that's the ultimate thing, right? You look at great photography and you decide which one is the best. Talk to us about the importance of having the right team to keep something going versus the wrong team and people that may not be able to support what your vision is.
Yeah, so I started this website called CompareFoodPics.com, and so I had a relatively well-known blog, so I had some relationships with popular bloggers. You guys might know Michael Ruhlman, 101 Cookbooks, to name a few. So I talked to these bloggers and asked them permission to use their pictures on my site. And the idea was that if they let me use their pictures on my site and link back to their original posts, they would gain traffic to their sites through my site. So basically, users were shown two random pictures of food up against each other, and they would pick which one they liked better. And over time, there was an algorithm that ranked the pictures based on which ones they've gone up against and which one has gotten the most clicks and a few other things. I didn't put that together. Some computer programmer put that together. But so then there was a top 10 list, and it listed the top performing pictures on that in the whole database. And so it started out really well. I was really excited about it. Really, my friends were giving me great feedback from it. But the idea didn't eventually work out. I had to just kind of shut it down last year because my programmer really was not. My initial programmer really was not motivated at all. He wasn't nearly as excited as I was about it. And I wasn't going to go spend thousands of dollars, hiring a programmer that would do some changes, but then wouldn't be around. So then I had another programmer. It was my sister's dad, my sister's friend's dad, and so he was just kind of doing it as a favor for me. I cooked him like a dinner to do some programming for me, but in retrospect, I would have gotten someone who was as passionate about food and about the idea as I was, because I had to shut it down because there were some changes that had to be made, and I couldn't keep asking my sister's friend's dad to keep updating and improving the site. So definitely find someone who's as motivated as you are. Find like-minded people. huge part of any business is getting the right people on the bus. As Jim Collins says in Good to Great, like that's essential. If you're gonna build a big company or a successful company.
So go back to the audience for a second. So again, raise your hand if you have an idea for a business or something that you would want to invent or start or do something. Okay, so keep your hands up. So of those people, who spent more than 10 hours researching that space, that area, or those products? Right? That's exactly right. Smart crowd. So what I want to talk about is the amount of time and research that has to go into putting, before you leap, before you cut, how many times do you measure it? And so Tori, you talked about the amount of research you did before you jumped into this space. And even then you didn't really know, you still didn't know everything there was to know. But you basically went to every conference, you signed up for every direct marketing program, and talk a little bit about that.
So when I was starting Utoria, I started with a personal investment of $10,000 and then my parents matched that. So I had $20,000 total. And most direct sales companies, I found out, start with between 1 and 4 million. So there was a huge gap there. So I had to get a bit creative with my funds and how I was going to use them. So, before my mom even gave me my investment, she's like, I'm not giving you any money until you know what you're talking about. Like, you're not blowing $10,000 on something that you're not going to be turning into profit. So I went and signed up for Avon, Mary & Kay, Stella & Dot, Visalis, Leah Sophia, and there were a few others that I signed up for too. And I just started studying them, and I would have parties, and I would study their materials and their compensation plans and their websites and kind of things that I liked and I didn't like. I went to meetings and other people's parties just to see what everyone did. And I got some really good ideas. And I had a good idea of the direction that I wanted to take my company in. I decided that I wanted a digital company instead of printing thousands of print magazines. I wanted it to be more friendly and empowering, where I found some other companies were kind of degrading, especially with downlines and things. So that's kind of where I started the reinvention process. But what I didn't realize is there's this whole other world that not everyone gets to see, and that's the world behind the direct sellers and the executives and the software people and the programmers and all those fun things. So I spent from August of 2010 to, I would say, March, April of 2011, just researching and experimenting and all those different things. And then from there, I went and joined the Direct Selling Association in December. And like we were talking about failures before, I went to the Direct Selling Association's conference in December in Las Vegas. And I came home in tears, like literally. My mom had to call Tori Johnson. She's like, I don't know what's wrong. Like, she's depressed. She doesn't want to do anything. Like, she just sleeps all the time. So we kind of had to have like a pep talk kind of call. But I came home really depressed because when I went to this conference, I found out that I had more of an affiliate program than an actual direct selling company. And that's when we went through this huge model expansion that's getting ready to launch later next month. So we now have a party plan, a full compensation plan, fundraising component, and all those really fun things that we didn't have before.
And those are all the nuts and bolts that are beyond the idea, right? I mean,
yeah.
The idea is great, but all those are the things that have to happen. Dan, so you, and I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, I don't think you did, but you worked at TechCrunch,
Yep.
which is one of the most influential tech websites, blogs in the world. And you would see so many startup concepts come through there. Everybody wants to be featured in TechCrunch. You worked
Right.
under Michael Arrington. What did you learn looking at that many startups and that many ideas?
The nice thing about being able to see so much is you can, I don't want to say easily because it's never easy, but you can quickly sift through the good and the bad. You can easily spot what's good and what's not, and you start looking at certain trends, And I think that it actually, a lot of what I did at TechCrunch just kind of prepped me for being a VC because I look for a lot of the same things.
What do you see? When you see something, what's a good idea versus a bad
Yeah, I
idea?
mean, when I was at TechCrunch and even now as a VC, I mean, I look for a few things. Obviously, I look at the market. I mean, we want to back entrepreneurs who are solving multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar markets. We have a company that's, basically taking on banks. We have companies that are a company that's taking on the entire entertainment industry. I mean, these are big industries. Team is a huge part. I mean, going back to what he was saying with, you know, finding the right team, we look for that as investors. Are these people going to be together for the next 20 years if their company goes public or whatever happens? We want to look at those big opportunities. We look in, obviously, the product. What are they building? Is it going to be something that people are actually going to enjoy and going to want to use and continue using for a long time? I mean, we're at TechCrunch. I covered everything from startups that just raise funding all the way up to companies like Facebook and Google. So I got to see a pretty wide gambit of companies. And even now as a VC, I get to see companies that even before they raise money, and kind of try to help them out and say, look, I've seen a lot of companies that have been at your stage. This is where they are now. Here are kind of some lessons learned. But, you know, being at TechCrunch, you see a lot of companies. You see product and past, you know, kind of traction of other, you know, people written about them. Have they been able to raise money? Things like that. And I look at a lot of the same things now as a VC.
Great. Well, wanted to open it up to the audience and see if anybody